Oh, ready. Okay, so I've been playing with the 4090 graphics card, and I wanted to share some of the stuff that I've learned this week. It's been pretty cool. So 10 days ago, I was able to get a MSI 4090 graphics card. It's great. It's not necessarily the one I would have chosen. I think I would prefer to have the Founder Edition, but I was able to get the card. It works great. Um, Fitting it in the PC was a challenge. I mean, it is a big card, and I actually had to flex case a little bit to get it to go in. Once it's in, it's fine. It's relaxed. There's no pressure. It's not under stress or anything like that. But the initial performance and stuff was pretty impressive. Just running like 3D Mark, tremendous jump in score over the 3090 that I had been running in the same system. And my initial iRacing benchmarks and testing and stuff, really good. I mean, in the past I was running 110% SteamVR and conservative settings at 75 hertz, and using the same settings, the same resolution with the 4090, I was just able to run 90, hit 90 hertz, no problem. And it ran cool. I mean, I've never seen it get above the mid 60 degrees Celsius range. In this particular test, after running for a full hour in a Lotus 79 race, it was only 62 degrees. So, not overheating, and it works. So, the headset I'm using is the Pimax 8KX. It's really nice. I like it a lot. I use it every day. As far as my personal preference, the field of view, I think, is the killer feature. And for sim racing, um, once you get it dialed in, my feeling is this really is the best experience. But some people like field of view, some people like resolution, some people like refresh rate. So my choice is the Pimax 8KX. And right now, I'm running a AMD 5600X CPU. And I want to do some benchmarking in this stream just to sort of capture all the data. But later this afternoon, I'm going to be switching and putting a 5800X3D back in this computer. So I have a 5800X3D, and I did some benchmarking back in April when the chip was released. And at that time, running with the 3090 graphics card, I really was not seeing a tremendous performance increase with the 5800X3D, and I'm curious to see now with the 4090 whether the CPU is being pressured a little more if we're not as GPU bound. So we'll see, but that's going to be the next set of benchmarks. To actually do the benchmarks, I wrote a little application called the iRacing Data Logger. That's a C# application and sits on top of the existing IRSDK Sharp framework. It's really simple. And basically what it does is as you're either running the game live or from a replay, it spits out comma-separated values for the replay time and frame information, as well as the frame rate, the CPU usage for background, the CPU usage foreground, and the GPU usage. And with that data, we can generate graphs and pie charts and line graphs and strong opinions. So the options that I'm running feel like they're pretty maxed out. Everything's on high as far as like all the geometry and stuff. The only thing I run without is crowds. Your mileage may vary. I don't feel like the crowd graphics add anything to my experience. So crowds is the one thing I just run with it out, turn it off. I don't really care about the crowds. The other thing that's important to note is that the resolutions that I'm running, I cannot afford to run more than 2x anti-aliasing. Any more than that, and it pushes the memory usage just off the charts, and all the textures come in muted, and it doesn't work. So for the time being, I feel like I'm sort of constrained to running with 2x anti-aliasing. But everything else is pretty much maximized. I also don't run with the high quality trees because there's tracks like Hungaroring. But if you have that option enabled, even with the system I'm running today, frame rate just plummets. So the only real compromises are the not running with high quality trees, not running with more than 2x anti-aliasing, and running with crowds off. Pretty much everything else feels like it's totally maximized. I'm running the maximum number of cars because I need that for the digital race engineer. When I'm running the game, I do have it set to drop the world and cars if it's not making 85 frames in the dynamic LOD stuff. But what we're going to be looking at today as far as the benchmarking will do is actually running with replay. So in that case, I have the dynamic LOD turned off. So it's not actually going to fluctuate. If it's not making frame rate, I don't want it to start adjusting the LODs and stuff to try and make it make frame rate. But everything else, the exception of crowds, everything else is still on high. So those are the settings we're going to be using. So this screenshot is the way that I had been running with the SteamVR set at 110% resolution. It's really good. And in the headset, it looks pretty good. But that's doing 110% resolution over the entire frame. That resolution is not low. So 110% is 5,244 by 3,524 per eye. That's really high. But it's funny because if you look at like the SteamVR suggestions, it suggests for this computer that we actually run 150%. So here I think I've got... So here's the 110% that I've been running. And that's the resolution. This little tick mark indicates that Steam thinks this computer could run 110%. 150%. That's 6,124 by 4,116 per eye. So it's actually double that for what the computer's actually rendering all the time. That's a really high resolution. And what I found was I can't, with the options I've got, I can't really do it. But running with OpenXR and the OpenXR Toolkit enabling the Fixed Foveated Rendering, I can get it to work. So that's the sort of realization that I've come to this week, is experimenting with OpenXR Toolkit and seeing what the reality is in terms of performance. So there's a concept of fixed foveated rendering. In this case, the way I have my stuff set, that's the actual area that is being rendered at 100%, 1-to-1, 150% SteamVR resolution. That's everything that I actually see clearly through the lenses in the headset. Adding around that is a middle area where it renders at 1/4 the resolution. The truth is, I can't actually see that stuff clearly in the headset because of the way the lenses and the panels and the optics work anyway. So this other area, this huge black area on the outside, we actually render that in at 1/16 of the real resolution. So this is kind of a more illustrative view. So this black area in the center is the middle intermediate area. The center is full resolution. The edge is 1/16 of the resolution. So if we zoom in and you're looking straight ahead, you see everything with like perfect clarity. Geometry is great. Textures are great. It's all good. If you look off to the side, once we get into the 1/16 area, this is low resolution. I mean, you can see how chunky, I hope you can see on the stream, but it is really, aliased, chunky, low resolution. And if you look all the way over to like the side, the geometry up here and stuff for those railings and stuff is obviously deteriorated. If we compare that with, this is a full screen at 150% resolution, and we go over to that same area. Come on, mouse. It's so much clearer. I mean, look at, wow, the clarity you can see in the support post is just jaw-dropping. Here at the 1/16 resolution, it's terrible. But the truth is, I can't see that clearly through the headset Anyway, so these are the settings that I'm running with the OpenXR Toolkit. My inner ring is 40%. The middle resolution I'm dropping down to 1/4. You can run at 1/2, but I found that like the optical difference, I can't tell the difference between 1/4 and 1/2. If I drop it down to 1/8, then I sort of can see some aliasing and stuff as I move my head around. The outer ring resolution I'm running, or the outer ring size I'm running, is 55%. And that outer ring resolution is 1/16. So what does this actually look like? Here, if we switch over to the game desktop, here we have it running in real time. And right now I've got it so that the middle ring is blacked out or cold. And when I'm here, get the view centered. So if I'm driving the car and I'm looking straight ahead, that black ring, I can definitely see it. But what's kind of just really fascinating is the area that it fills is my primary view and well off to the sides. What we see on the actual like bitmap, you have all this additional geometry and area off to the side. If I look straight ahead, but I turn my eye all the way over, I can just barely see like that Embassy Suites sign, but I can't even really see where it becomes Pepsi. I mean, if I just turn my head a little bit, it's there. So it's rendering on the panel, but the way the lenses and the optics and stuff work, I can't see that far. And the way the resolution clarity drops off, once I'm down in the black area, I can see obviously that the black area exists, but if I go in and turn it back from cull to 1/16th, I can see it sort of shimmer when I look around. At 1/8, I can still kind of see it. And if I like move the area of text or whatever on the steering wheel into what I know is that area, yeah, I can see that it's there. But when I move it down to 1/4 resolution, I can't see that it's being lowered in resolution anything more than what's just being removed by the optics. And if I up it to 1/2, so it's now running at 1/2 in that middle resolution, I see no improvement. So if I drop it between 1/4 and 1/2, without an improvement, I choose to run it at 1/4. So those are the settings that I'm running. And I want to do some benchmarking and stuff. My goal actually is to look at what we've got right now for performance with the 5600X CPU, and then swap, put the 5800X 3D back in the computer and rerun the same tests and see whether with the 40 series graphics card we actually appreciate a difference in the CPUs more than we did when I was running with 3090. I kind of think it's going to be academic, but I'm curious to see. So the first test that I want to do is just the baseline. If we set SteamVR to be 110%, set the rendering mode to be OpenVR, and I go in to the OpenXR Toolkit, and I turn it off. So it has this nice option, you can just disable it altogether. So it shouldn't make any difference because we're running with OpenVR anyway for this first test, but OpenXR is off, OpenVR is selected. We're going to run and observe whether it makes 90 hertz frame rate at 110. So the process is we launch this replay. Okay, so I have this replay. It's what I used when I was doing all the benchmarking
Pace car
before.
is going.
It's not a perfect replay, but it is representative of races and series that I run. It's got a good field of cars, and there's good fluctuation in, I think, the demand for frame rate and stuff. during the first lap. So right now you can see down here in SteamVR, we're making frame rate just as it's sitting. So that's a good sign. And the way the profiling stuff goes, here, if we switch this sheets. Okay. The program that I ran, and I also want to run with the task manager up so we can see CPU utilization. The CPU utilization is the biggest sort of wonder and mystery part right now because it fluctuates depending on how we run the game and what's being measured and how iRacing reports that CPU utilization. So part of my goal in terms of just doing this on stream is I want to record the video of the CPU utilization and stuff as I do all these benchmarks so I can go back and check it out later on and just see if it's, you know, especially once we switch to the 5800X3D. That's where I'm curious to see what's going to be going. So this is going to be a baseline. We're running OpenVR with fully wait for sync is an option that you kind of have to turn on if you want to see the iRacing R meter or the CPU utilization exposed. If you are running OpenVR and you don't have that option selected, the CPU utilization is sort of opaque. It just gets reported as a solid number that's relative to the frame rate that it's making, but it doesn't actually fluctuate to show you what the CPU utilization is. So by running with fully wait for sync enabled, we'll actually see the CPU utilization, but I don't like it, and we'll see how that goes. But right now we're running 110% SteamVR. That's the resolution per eye. And I'm pretty confident this makes 90 hertz because that's the way I've been running it, but we'll do the test and stuff anyway. So once the replay is queued up, and just make sure that, yeah, we're at the beginning of the replay, the head position is reset. This window is my little tool, and it samples 4 times a second to get the data. And I have it set so that it's actually waiting for a specific time to start getting the data. So as soon as I start the replay, it's actually collecting stuff now. And we'll watch the lap. But I'm probably going to cut out most of these runs in post-production, but we'll see. And we can see right now on the SteamVR that it's making frame rate, 9 or 10 milliseconds out of a budget of 11 for 90 hertz. So that's good. Pretty good baseline. We switch back to the iRacing data logger. It's no longer collecting samples. It spits out the comma separated file. I go and I get it here on the network. This is on the stream PC. I just grab the CSV file. So this was 5600X, OpenXR, OpenVR, sorry. And we were running with fully wait for sync. And it was the 110% SteamVR resolution. So the way I've got a process for sheets, I tell it to import, upload, drag the file in, placing the spreadsheet's fine. Okay, so these are all the data that it collected. We're going to grab those columns and have it print out a little chart. So look at that. Not surprisingly, we were making frame rate pretty much the entire time. There's a couple little hiccups, but not terrible. There's one other group of data that people like to see, the bar graphs. So if we grab these column cells, and we paste that into this sheet, we just get the average, minimum, and maximum for each of the key: frame rate, CPU utilization, GPU utilization. And we do that as a chart. Comes up as these bar graphs. So we'll use this as we compare moving forward. So running with fully wait for sync, we see the CPU utilization. And it's, there's an interesting correlation when the GPU is working harder, so is the CPU, but, they're not one-to-one certainly. But there is interesting sort of similarity in the traces. So this is the baseline. We're making 190 hertz at 110% SteamVR resolution. It's great. But my goal was actually to run 150% with the fixed foveated rendering to have higher clarity where I can actually see it and not render the areas that I can't see clearly, to have the trade-off for performance. So what we're going to do is switch the game off. SteamVR, we're going to switch back to 150%. Run the same test that way, changing nothing else. So we're still running fully wait for sync. We're still running OpenVR. The only difference is we've changed the SteamVR resolution from 110% to 150%. Long ago, there was sort of like a benchmark expectation that you want to have 1.6 times the panel resolution be what's actually rendered, because the way the barrel distortion works, and you actually want more pixels than your panel resolution, so the subsampling makes it clear where you can actually see it. So, and that's what we achieve with that 150%. It actually comes out to, so the Pimax panel is 3,840 by 2,160. So the 150% SteamVR is actually 101.6 times horizontal and 1.9% vertical. So it might actually be overkill. There might, I don't know if anybody does have like the actual mathematical, precise, ideal, optimal resolution. I'd love to know. But 150% seems like it's bordering on overkill, but obviously clear in the headset. So what we're doing now is the experiment 1. Which OpenVR, fully wait for sync, 150% SteamVR resolution. So here we are in the replay. Everything's centered and queued up. We run the, and look, even just sitting here without the simulation advancing, we're not making frame rate. It's 12 milliseconds out of 11.1 budget. So we'll see how it goes over the run, but it's waiting for samples now. And away we go. Okay, so the run finished. Tell the tool to stop selecting data. Go up to the other computer. So this was OpenVR with fully wait for sync at 150 SteamVR resolution. And if we go in Sheets and tell it to import, upload, drag and drop the file that we just sampled, tell it to insert it as a new sheet. And then we do the same thing. We grab the columns, insert the chart, go back to the other sheet and grab these cells. And it's just copying the formula. The data actually obviously gets populated in from the other columns. Okay. So if we look at the difference between these two, when we were running 110 SteamVR resolution, we were able to make frame rate no problem. Now that we're trying to make 150, it's not doing it. And as you might expect, both the CPU utilization and the GPU utilization are elevated, but obviously the frame rate is not following up. So we're not making 90 hertz. Okay. So I want to change the option so that it's not using the fully wait for sync anymore and run the same thing again, just to see how the numbers being reported may be different. The iRacing Render DX11 for OpenVR. And the only change I'm going to make is down here for this fully wait for sync option. It was enabled. Turn it off. Save the INI file. And run the replay again. So not running the fully wait for sync. When I'm normally running the game, this is the way I would run it. Fully wait for sync does expose the CPU utilization, but it also does some other stuff as far as the input polling and things that I don't think it's an option that you just want to run with all the time. For profiling and stuff, it's the only way to expose the CPU utilization, so you don't really have a choice. But here we are back in the replay. It's queued up. Run the tool again and sample the data. Okay, so they finished the lap. iRacing data logger has collected all its samples. Close the tool. Go back up on the other computer. So this is OpenVR. And it's pretty much just playing. So this is the way I would run it. It's not running with the fully wait for sync or anything. And in Sheets, we're going to have it import, upload, drag and drop, have it insert a new sheet. I think those other cells are still in the clipboard. Nope. Okay, so we grab these columns, make a chart. We grab these cells, make a chart. Okay. So what's fascinating to me is the difference between these two runs is enabling fully wait for sync in this run and this run without fully wait for sync. And it's interesting how now what's being reported as the CPU utilization follows almost exactly the same contour as the GPU utilization, which seems a little suspicious. I don't really expect them to be that in line. I mean, it's hard to say. In the other graphs, there is correlation. You know, when the GPU is working harder, so is the CPU and stuff. But these look like they're almost lockstep with each other. Hey, Lucky Shark. I don't think so. And like I said, the difference between these two is just fully wait for sync. And if we look at the CPU, or the actual frame rate that's achieved, that stays pretty consistent. So there is a little bit of difference, but if you just look at the blue line with the frame rate, it's not that much different. So I think there's just something different about the way the CPU utilization is being reported by iRacing when you turn on and off that option, whether it's making frame rate or not. Um, so the next experiment is going to be opening with OpenXR. So we're going to change nothing as far as the options. SteamVR is going to still be the same resolution. The only thing we're changing is here in the iRacing UI, we're going to tell it to run OpenXR. I just want to confirm I have the OpenXR toolkit installed, but it currently has the options selected so that it is disabled and should not be activated in any substantial way when we run. So we're going to run the same replay, but now the switch is from OpenVR to OpenXR. And OpenXR doesn't have an option like fully wait for sync to expose the CPU utilization. So if we were actually making frame rate, this run would show the CPU utilization as a flat line. But since we're probably not making frame rate, it'll be more interesting. Okay, so we're back in the replay. Things reset and queued up. Run the iRacing data logger and collect the data. Okay, so we finished the lap. Stop the tool. Rename the file. So this is the first one that we're doing that is actually OpenXR. And it's just plain, so it's going to be OpenXR 01. Back in Sheets, we're doing file import, upload, drop, start a new sheet. Those column cells, we grab these columns, start a chart, grab these cells, and insert a chart. Okay, so the difference between running OpenVR and OpenXR, almost nothing appears to change in what's reported as the GPU utilization. And there's some slight changes, but the actual consistency of the trace looks pretty identical to me. The CPU utilization is reported as higher here than it was in OpenVR. And our frame rate is a little bit lower. So it seems like switching from OpenXR or OpenVR to OpenXR at 150% Steam resolution without changing anything else does actually impact frame rate. And we are not making as good frame rate in OpenXR as we were in OpenVR. Neither one of them are making 90 hertz by any stretch, but it looks like the OpenVR is slightly more performant. Okay, so the next experiment is that we're going to turn the OpenXR toolkit on, but not enable any of the options. So we're just going to enable the tool. So I'm going to deselect the disable option and run the replay again. Okay, so we're in with OpenXR enabled. The OpenXR toolkit is running, but the fixed foveated rendering is disabled. And I think it's interesting that we see a CPU core now nearly fully utilized. In all the other experiments so far, the CPU utilization has not had any core saturated. But now that we're running the OpenXR toolkit, it does, even though the OpenXR toolkit is allegedly not doing any of its optimizations or options right now. So we reset the replay, run the tool, collect the data. Okay, so they finished the lap, stop the data logger, rename the file, OpenXR, with the toolkit at 150% SteamVR resolution. So import, upload, drag and drop, insert a new sheet. Okay. So the difference between these two is this is running OpenXR in iRacing, but it's not running the OpenXR toolkit at all, or at least it says it's disabled. This is running the OpenXR toolkit, but none of the options are turned on. So it seems like running the OpenXR toolkit hurts frame rate and elevates the CPU utilization slightly. But the GPU utilization, again, looks like it's pretty consistent with the other runs. So even going back to OpenVR, just looking at the GPU utilization, I'm not seeing significant difference between those. But again, OpenVR, we're enjoying a higher overall frame rate and a lower overall CPU utilization, at least from the way it's being reported. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. But clearly, we're seeing lower frame rate. That's the proof in the pudding. So now we're already running the OpenXR toolkit. Go in and actually turn on my custom fixed foveated rendering. So just to show you, that's the middle resolution at 1/4, and that's the outside resolution, which we're running at 1/16. So running like that, lo and behold, the SteamVR telemetry is showing that we're making frame rate now, which we weren't before. So if we reset the replay, reset the HMD position, rerun the data logger, collect the data, we're now making frame rate. Okay, so this run was with the OpenXR, with the OpenXR toolkit, and the fixed foveated rendering enabled. So let's stop the data logger, rename the file, greetings B10s. So this was OpenXR with fixed foveated rendering. $150% SteamVR resolution. Import that into the sheet. New sheet. Copy the formulas for our summary cell. All right, see what we get. Grab the columns, insert a chart, grab these cells, insert the chart. Okay, so like I said, there are a couple hiccups. I'm not too concerned about that, but overall, it is making frame rate. This is running OpenXR Toolkit with the conservative custom fixed foveated rendering, and it makes 90 hertz. Running the toolkit without the fixed foveated rendering seems like it's a cost, especially compared to running OpenXR without the toolkit. And OpenVR, before we got the fixed foveated rendering, this was the highest performance. Let's look at the comparison of the GPU utilization between OpenVR and OpenXR with the fixed foveated rendering. Our GPU usage is a lot calmer and lower. The CPU utilization is now being obscured because that's the way the OpenXR reports the CPU utilization when you're making frame rate, so we don't really get value there. But yeah, comparing OpenXR with fixed foveated rendering obviously is the win. And as I look in the headset, the way I have the areas and the resolutions and stuff set up, I cannot see where the resolution deteriorates. So I would have been in the camp that says I want to render the whole image perfectly and, suffer that cost. But the reality of, the pixels that are way over here on the side, I can't see the difference between full resolution and 1/16th resolution. And here in the midpoint, I can see the difference between like 1/8 and 1/2, but the compromise of running in a quarter seems totally satisfactory. So my next goal is to switch the CPUs. All of this that we've been looking at so far today has been with the 5600X AMD CPU. And I am really curious about the way the one core running with the OpenXR toolkit gets saturated. And I'm curious to see whether there's a difference measurable between the 5600X and the 5800X 3D. So I'm going to swap the CPUs and then effectively do all these tests again with the 5800X 3D, and we'll see what we get. So thanks for watching. Pit Girl, end stream.
Ending stream. Please remain calm.